Shalom. Kahala Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, Bashem Rukol Kodash. Double honors my teachers, the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace and mercy to the elect with the house of David reborn again in this generation. And Shalom to the 130 Yasharallah, who today are known as the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, who before losing our true heritage were known as, and still are, the true Hebrew Israelites of the Holy Bible. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about Edom within the nation of Ishmael, right? And I wanted to get into the subject because, one, I want to just get back to basics, and also I want to just go into some of the little deep things, right? Especially now since my accounts are laden with many strikes. So I'm going to stick to some study material for a bit. So one of the things I want to talk about is the false idea that Edom are the Arabs. Okay, first of all, that is false, right? It is very clear and plain to see that the Edomites are the Caucasian race. Okay, they are the ones who rule the world. They far outspend any other nation with their military might. Morally, they are opposite to anything the Most High says, where the Arabs don't match the prophecies of the Edomites. Okay, and we all know that the Arabs go back to Ishmael. Now, that being said, there is Edomites within the nation of Ishmael, and guess what? Edom, just as Israel, is mixed in with every one of the 18 nations of the world. Okay, that's just the way it is, right? There's no more pure race for the most part. Everybody has, for the most part, mixed, and that's because the rulers of the world want it so, especially these Edomites, and they're doing this because just as a bank robber who goes into the bank and then tries to sneak out with the hostages, which is what's known as an inside man, job, Edom is trying to blend in with these other nations, not only to hide himself, but to also gain power from within that nation, right? But let's go and read a little bit about Ishmael, right, in the Bible, because everybody talks about how the Arabs are all about the Quran. Now, that is true. They follow the teachings of the Quran, which for the most part are false. It was a book created by a man named Muhammad about the 600s. Let's actually get into the Bible, or the Bible timeline. When you get into the Bible timeline, the Quran came into be around 609 to 632 is when it was created, right? And it was created by, like I said, Muhammad, who was influenced by a Vatican nun who was sent to tutor him. And she, along with the Catholic Church, heavily influenced Muhammad to basically create what you have today as known as the Quran. This is why Islamists, they use prayer beads just like the Catholics do. And there's a lot of other similarities between Islam and Catholicism, right? And one of the glaring follies of Muhammad's teachings is that before the Quran came into place, the Arabs were actually calling upon the Most High by his name, Yahweh, right? This is why if you go to any literature from the Arabs before 600 AD, all the references to the Most High were all in his proper name, Yahweh, right? After that, they started calling him Allah, which is basically just ancient Hebrew for all power. Okay? Now, that being said, this is by the will of the Lord, because the will of the Lord is that he did not want the Arabs to have his name, right? Because only the children of Israel would eventually have the true name of not only the Most High Father, Yahweh, but the Messiah, whose true Hebrew name is Yahweh Shai, which is Hebrew for he is salvation, right? That's who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, or who the Arabs call, I think they call him EC or something, or I think EC or something like that. But they don't have the right names. Now that being said, let's read about Ishmael, because the Arabs, their beginning actually is written about in the Bible, because they are of the Shemite bloodline. But let's read this first. This is Genesis 21:12. And God said unto Abraham, actually let me restart at 9. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, right, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. Wherefore she said unto Abraham, cast out this bondwoman and her son. Her son would be Ishmael, the forefather of the Ishmaelites, or the Arabs, excuse me. For the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. And the thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son. And God said unto Abraham, let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad, and because of thy bondwoman, in all that Sarah hath said unto thee. Hearken unto her voice, for in Isaac shall thy seed be called, and also of the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation. Okay? Because he is thy seed. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and took bread and a bottle of water and gave it unto Hagar, putting it on her shoulder and the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. So you see, the seed line of Abraham goes into multiple nations, right? He is the father of the Arabs, the so-called Negroes, so-called Latinos, and so-called Native Americans, who are together. Those three together are known as the Israelites, and also the father of the Caucasian nation. Okay? Now, that being said, there was a specific chosen seed line from Abraham. Now let's actually go to the Bible family tree and let's look at Abraham's lineage. So you got Abram here, right? Now Abram, he got with Sarai, whose name later was changed to Sarah. Well, you see, not only did he get with Sarah, but he also got with Keturah after Sarah, right? And if you look over here, you got Hagar, the Egyptian, right? And from Hagar, Abraham had Ishmael. And these were the 12 princes of Ishmael, right? And when you look here, this is the Arab woman who married into the Esau's bloodline, right? The Caucasian race. But again, that's another story. But yeah, the Arabs ultimately come from Abraham. But again, the chosen seed line of Abram didn't go to the Arabs. It didn't go to the children of Keturah. It went down to the children of Sarah. Okay? And then that's where you had Isaac, right? Because what did the scripture say? In Isaac shall thy seed be called, right? And from Isaac you had Jacob, and you had Esau, right? But again, the chosen line went down to Jacob and his 12 sons, right? Who make up the 12 tribes of Israel, right? Now, that being said, as the scripture had mentioned, the Lord also would bless Ishmael and make him a nation as well. Well, that nation that you would know today is filled with many wealthy nations, right? You got Qatar, Yemen, right? The UAE, and one of the most powerful of all the Arab nations, Saudi Arabia, right? Now, just as I said that you have Edomites within the nation of Ishmael, right? You tend to find these Edomites at the very top of the Ishmaelite society, just as you find Edom or especially the top tribe of Edom, the Amalekites, the so-called Jews, at the top of almost every westernized nation. Okay, it doesn't matter what they are, right? There's always tends to be a so-called Jew at the very top. And that being said, when you look at the royal family in Saudi Arabia, the House of Saud, they are descendants of so-called Jews, right? They are Amalekites or Edomites, basically, right? And this is the first time that this has happened, that the Edomites have come together with Arabs, right? You could go back to the Schechter letters, which are stored at University of Cambridge, right? These letters it's a collection of letters that came together, and this man here, Solomon Schechter, who worked at the Cambridge University in 1898, he was actually given a collection of Genisa papers, right? And Genisa are basically, you see, the so-called Jews, they have a belief that the writings of Hebrew, right, are sacred and should never be thrown away, right? They make an idol out of writing, basically. And well, what they do is anything that is written cannot be thrown away, but it must be stored at their synagogues, right? And here's a image of this, for example, where it shows storing the Hebrew writings in the Cairo Genisa, later found by Solomon Schechter in 1898. Well, Solomon Schechter found a lot of these papers, and these papers that were found in that Egyptian Genisa explain not only, the conversion, the mass conversion of the Khazarian empires, right, from the Khazar Empire to taking on a newly created heritage or newly created religion based off of the heritage of the Israelites, where they would study what they created known as Judaism, right? But it also proves that there were Edomites, so-called Jews or Khazars or Amalekites, they go by many different names, amongst the Arabs, right? It tells you here, it says, the Schechter letters are a collection of papers found in a Cairo Genisa and has a Khazar correspondence from 950 AD between Hasdai Ian Shapru, who is this guy here, right? This is a so-called Jew or an Edomite, foreign secretary to the Caliph of Cordoba, and Joseph Kagan of the Khazars, right? So you had this man, Hasdai Ian Shapru, this guy, who is basically the secretary, the foreign secretary of this Arab, this Ishmaelite here, Caliph of Cordoba, right? Caliph was kind of like a king or a nobleman, right, of a certain section. Well, he had this Amalekite in his courtyard, right, as his foreign secretary. Well, you see, this isn't the only time when these so-called Jews got into power, right? This is just an example. And when you study the Ottoman Empire, which is where you get, for the most part, the Arab nations in Turkey today, well, the Ottoman Empire was a very large and powerful country, and it was mostly mixed between Ishmael and Edom, right? And this is why when you look at Turkey, Turkey is pretty much Esau and Ishmael mixed together, right? That's what their people tend to make. But again, I digress. The whole point being is that for the most part, Edom was always very close to the Ishmaelites, right? And this goes all the way back to biblical times when the Edomites basically started marrying into the Arab or the Ishmaelite tribes known as the Nabateans. Okay, this was Again, let's go to the Bible timeline. After you got, let's see, here you go. You got Petra, where the Edomites basically were written about. This, you could read about them in Herodotus, who was the first Edomite to write what's known as a history book, right? This book is called The Histories. If you go to college, you'll read about that. Well, you had Edom take over the what you would know today as the people of the South Seas, like the Samoans, the Fijians, or whatever, who were the original Greeks. Well, Edom conquered them, and and eventually took on their identity, being the Greeks, right? If you go through my channel, you'll find a video saying that the Macedonians were not Greek. It's a 5-hour documentary that I pieced together that shows so many historic examples how the Macedonians basically try to sneak into the Greek heritage and take that on for themselves, right? That happened through Alexander. You also have the splitting of Alexander's nation, and which basically sent these Edomites all throughout the world. And like I said, you had stories about how Edom marries into the neighboring Arab tribes, the Nabateans, and it says it takes their identity and starts being known as the Nabateans, right? This is why if you go to Petra, Jordan today, they attribute this dwelling place to the Nabateans, right? But again, we all know through the true history that the Nabateans were simply just the Arabs who Esau married into and basically merged amongst, just like he does with every other nation. And he does this, why? Because the curse of Cain is upon him. This is why they are a vagabond and a fugitive upon the earth, man. They are hiding from their judgment. Well, I said enough about that. So back to the royal family of the House of Saud. When you get into the current ruler of the House of Saud, right, he goes back to this man called Abdul Aziz ibn Saud, right? And he was the guy who basically started the House of Saud, right? And the reason why the Saudi family got so powerful, and the reason why Saudi Arabia is named after them, is because ultimately they basically opened up the Saudi Arabia Peninsula oil market to the Western world, okay? And they've been kept in power and given military weapons and arsenals and supplied armies by the Western powers, namely America, because they are only selling their oil in US dollars, right? And this is ultimately happens because these guys are ultimately Jews. They are not descendants of Ishmaelites. They are descendants of Edom, Esau, right? And they are the same people who are in the land of Israel and basically over here in the land of America, Babylon the Great. Because again, when you get over here to America, for the most part, the people at the very top of the political and power structure here in America are Amalekites, so-called Jews. Well, when you get into the history of the Saudi family, you find out about the Saudi and the Hashemite dynasties. Well, the Hashemite dynasties are the true descendants of Ishmael, right? These are the people who have power in Saudi Arabia, but they are not considered the leading family, right? The House of Saud, for the most part, took over. Well, we're going to find out. We're going to read the story of how these House of Saud came into power. But before we read that, let me get the scripture. This is Ecclesiasticus 10:8. Because of unrighteous dealings, injuries, and riches got by deceit, the kingdom is translated from one people to another. Now this ultimately is talking about the kingdom of Israel and how it ultimately fell to these other heathens, right? But it also applies to how these heathens, namely Edom, took over these other nations, right? By injuries and riches got by deceit, right? And unrighteous dealings. Well, let's go and read this posting, right? Now this posting used to be posted a lot of places, but it's been taken down, and ultimately it's an Arab it's an Arab folk story about the Saud family, right? This is what the Arabs people actually believe regarding these people here, right? Now, I'm gonna go and read it, and we're gonna go ahead and just let it speak for itself, so you can understand how these House of Saud family are in fact Edomites, right? But again, remember, these are the people at the very top, right? The rest, the bottom rung of Ishmael, which are still very wealthy, very privileged, are the Ishmaelites, right? But you got the small sect at the very top, the elites of the Arab nations that are in fact Edomites, right? So let's read this. It says, the House of Saud refers to the royal family of Saudi Arabia. While the modern nation of Saudi Arabia was established in 1932, the House of Saud has been around for much longer. Prior to Ibrahim Saud, the family ruled the Najd and often came into conflict with the Ottoman Empire, right? And the Rashidis, the House of Saud, is also linked to Wahhabism through the marriage of the son of Muhammad ibn Saud with the daughter of Muhammad ibn Abul al-Wahhad in 1744. Basically, supposedly they married, one of the women that one of these men married was the daughter, or the daughter of Muhammad, the guy who wrote the Bible, right? Or at least a descendant. But again, if you understand the Bible, it doesn't matter what woman you have children with, because again, ultimately it's the seed that the man carries that determines who that person is, who that soul in that child is going to be, right? So it doesn't matter what woman these Edomites slept with, though that's a clear sign that these devils, right, or that these are the Edomites, because again, like the parable of the wheat and the tares, just as explained in the parable that the enemy came and sowed tares amongst the wheat, right? That's what these devils have done. They have sown tares amongst the wheat of Ishmael, okay? And these are ultimately Arab tares, right? They're Edomites that look like Ishmaelites, okay? Continuing. The history of the House of Saud has been marked by a desire to unify the Arabian Peninsula and to spread a more pure and simple view of Islam embodied by Wahhabism. As such, the House of Saud has gone through three phases: the first Saudi state, the second Saudi state, and the modern nation of Saudi Arabia. It should be noted that the Saudi Arabia is the only country on earth named after a family. The adjective Saudi indicates something belonging to the House of Saud. And to know more about the House of Saud, click on the link below. And these links are dead because this is an old page that has managed to stay up. Now comes to the main matter, the Saudi dynasty. From where is it, and who is the real ancestors of this family? This is the research and presentation of Mohammed Shakar, who was ordered killed by the Saudi regime for the following findings. 1. Are the Saudi family members belonging to the tribe of Anza bin Wa'il, as they allege to be? 2. Is Islam their actual religion? 3. Are they of an Arab origin at all? It says, in the year 851 AD, a group of men from al-Masalik clan, which was a branch of the Anza tribe, formed a caravan for buying cereals, wheat and corn, and other foodstuffs from Iraq, and transporting it back to Najd. The head of that group was a man called Shami bin Hathulu, who the caravan reached Basra, where the members of the group went to a cereal merchant who was a Jew called Mordecai bin Ibrahim bin Moshe. During their bargaining with that merchant, the Jew asked them, "Where are you from?" They answered, from Anza tribe, a clan of Al-Masalik. Upon hearing the name, the Jew started to hug so affectionately each one of them, saying that he himself was also from the clan of Al-Masalik, but he had come to reside in Basra, Iraq, in consequence to a family feud between his father and some members of Anza tribe. After he recounted to them his fabricated narrative, he ordered his servants to load all the camels of the clan's members with wheat, dates, and tamim, a remarkable deed so generous that astonished the Masalik men and aroused their pride to find such an affectionate cousin in Iraq. The source of their sustenance, they believed each word he said, and because he was a rich merchant of the food commodities which they were badly in need, they liked him, even though he was a Jew concealed under the garb of an Arab from El-Masalik clan. When the caravan was ready to depart, returning to Najd, the Jewish merchant asked them to accept his company because he intended to go with them to his original homeland, Najd. Upon hearing that from him, they wholeheartedly welcomed him with a very cheerful attitude. So that concealed Jew reached Najd with a caravan. In Najd, he started to promulgate a lot of propaganda for himself through his companions, his alleged cousins, in fact, which gathered around him a considerable number of new supporters. But unexpectedly, he confronted a campaign of opposition to his views, led by Sheikh Salah Salman Abdullah al-Tami, who was a Muslim religious preacher in Al-Qasim. The radius of his preaching area included Najd, Yemen, and Hejaz, a fact which compelled the Jew, the ancestor of the present Saudi family, to depart from Al-Qasim to Al-Isha, where he changed his name Mordecai to Markan bin Ibrahim Musa. Then he changed the location of his residence and settled at a place called Dariya near El-Katif, where he started to spread among the inhabitants a fabricated story about the shield of our prophet Muhammad. All right, does that sound familiar? The shield of Muhammad? Didn't these guys, the so-called Jews, create a whole folklore around the shield of David? Right? You see that? Same tactics, different places. That it was taken as a booty by the Arab pagan in consequence of OHOD battle between the Arab pagans and the Muslims. That shield, he said, was sold by the Arab pagan to a Jewish clan called Banu Kanu'ka, who preserved it as a treasure. He gradually enhanced his position amongst the Bedouins through such stories which indicated how the Jewish clans of Arabia were so influential and deserved high esteem. He gained some personal importance amongst the Bedouins and decided to settle permanently there at Dariya town near Al-Katif, which he decided to be his capital on the Persian Gulf. He aspired to make it his springboard for establishing a Jewish kingdom in Arabia. In order to fulfill his ambitious scheme, he started to approach the desert Arab Bedouins for support of his position. Then gradually, he declared himself as their king. At that juncture, Anjaman tribe, together with Banu Khalid tribe, became fully aware of that Jewish cunning plan after they had verified his true identity and decided to put an end to him. They attacked his town and conquered it, but before arresting him, he had escaped by the skin of his teeth. The Jewish ancestor of the Saud family, Mordecai, sought shelter in a farm called, at the time, El Malibid Gusubabi Abba near Al Arid, which is called at our present time Al Rayad. He requested the owner of that farm to grant him an asylum. The farmer was so hospitable that he immediately gave him sanctuary. But that Jew Mordecai, no longer than a month had he stayed there, when he assassinated the landlord and all the members of his family, pretending that all were killed by an invading band of thieves. Then he pretended that he had bought that real estate from them before that catastrophe happened to them. Accordingly, he had the right to reside there as a landlord. He then gave a new name to the place. He named it El Daria, the same name as that he had lost. Right. So you see this. This is another, calling card of these Edomites, man. Where if they want the land that you are on, they're going to basically kill you and take that land from you. Right? Continuing. The Jewish ancestor of the Saudi family, Mordecai, was quick to establish a guest house called Madafa on the land he usurped from his victims, and gathered around him a group of hypocrites who started to spread out false propaganda for him that he was a prominent Arab sheikh. He plotted against Sheikh Salman Abdullah al-Tamimi, his original enemy, and caused his assassination in the mosque of the town called El-Zalafi. After that, he felt satisfied and safe to make Al-Dariya his permanent home. There he practiced polygamy at a wide scale. There you go. This is how the nation of Esau spread within the Arab families so quickly, right? This is how they were able to establish a foothold within the nation of Ishmael, right? And if you look at how Ishmael did this, how Edom did this amongst the other tribes, the 12 tribes that is, right? He had the slave owners sleeping with the slave women, right? Not only for the southern kingdom, but also for the northern kingdom, right? During the time of the conquest of the Latinos, and then down the road, the conquest of the Native American Indians, man. You had our women raped and pillaged, and they brought forth many tears. This is why you have so many so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today who are bugged out, right? Don't even act like us, right? And ultimately, it's because their father's lineage goes back to a so-called Edomite. An Edomite, a so-called white person. But let's go ahead and continue. Polygamy at a wide scale, and indeed, he begat a lot of children whom he gave pure Arab names. Ever since his descendants grew up in number and power under the name of Saudi clan, they have followed his steps in practicing underground activities and conspiracies against the Arab nation. They illegally seized rural sectors and farmlands and assassinated every person who tried to oppose their evil plan. They used all kinds of deceit for reaching their goals. They bought the conscience of their dissidents. They offered their women and money. They offered them women and money to influence people in that area, right? Particularly to those who started to write the true biography of the Jewish family. They bribed writers of history in order to purify their ignominious history, and which ignominious means reserving of shame, right? Or deserving of shame and ridicule, and make their lineage related to the same prominent Arab tribes as Rabia, Anza, and Al-Masalik, right? So you see another clear sign of the Edomite nature, man, right? Where they will bribe, kill, and swindle, right? What did that scripture say? Unrighteous dealings, injuries, right? That's killing off, injuring people, and riches gotten by deceit. Continuing, a conspicuous hypocrite in our era, whose name is Mohammed Amin al-Tamami, director manager of the contemporary libraries of the Saudi kingdom, made up a genealogical family tree for this Jewish family, the Saudis, connecting them to our great prophet Muhammad. For his false works, he received a reward of 35,000 Egyptian pounds from the then Saudi ambassador to Cairo, Egypt, in the year 1362 AD. And it says the name of the ambassador is Ibrahim el-Fadal. As aforementioned, the Jewish ancestor of the Saudi family, Mordecai, practiced polygamy by marrying a lot of Arab women and begot many children. His polygamous practice is at the present time being carried out to the letter by his descendants. They cling to his marital heritage. One of Mordecai's sons, called El-Makaran, Arabized from the Jewish root Makrin, begat a son called Mohammed, then another son called Saud, which is the name of the present-day Saud dynasty, right? And that's this guy here, right? Saud, right? This guy. So let's get back to this. Descendants of Saud, the present-day Saudi family, started a campaign of assassination of the prominent leaders of the Arab tribes under the pretense that those leaders were apostates, renegades from the Islamic religion, and deserting their Quranic doctrines. So they deserved the Saudi condemnation and slaughter. In the history book of the Saudi family, page 98 to 101, their private family historian declares that, and let's read it, the Saudi dynasty considers all the people of Najd blasphemous, so that their blood must be shed, their properties confiscated, and their families be taken as concubines, or their females taken as concubines. No Muslim is authentic in his or her belief unless she belongs or affiliates to the sect of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, whose origins are also Jewish from Turkey, right? And didn't I tell you that the Turkey people are basically a mixture of the Arabs and the Ishmael, right? His doctrines give authority to the Saudi family to destroy the villages with all their inhabitant males, including children, and to sexually assault their women, stab the bellies of the pregnant, and cut off the hands of their children, then burn them. They are further authorized by such a brutal doctrine to plunder all the properties of whom they call renegades, not following their Wahhabi sect. Their hideous Jewish family has, in fact, done all that kind of atrocities in the name of their false religious sect, the Wahhabi, and then also when you get into Wahhabism, that's where you get the Arab terrorism and all the crazy shit you hear that these Arabs do. They're basically practicing Wahhabism. Continuing, which was actually been invented by a Jew so as to sow the seed of terror in the hearts of people in towns and villages. This Jewish dynasty has been committing such brutal atrocities since 1163 AD. They have named the whole Arabian Peninsula after their family name, Saudi Arabia, as if the whole region in their own personal real estate, that all the other inhabitants are their mere servants or slaves, toiling day and night for the pleasures of the masters, the Saudi family. They are completely holding the natural wealth of the country as their own property. If any poor person from the common people raise his or her voice complaining against any of the despotic rules of the Jewish dynasty, the dynasty cuts off his or her head in the public square. A princess of there once visited Florida, USA with her retinue. She rented 90 suite rooms in the Grand Hotel for about $1 million a night. Can any one of their subjects comment about the extravagant event? If he or she does, his or her fate is quite known. Death with the edge of the Saudi sword in the public square. Witnesses on the Jewish ancestry of the Saudi family. And this just goes into the all the sources for this if you want to pause the video and read it. But this just shows you, man. This shows you how the very top elites, you know, the leaders of the Arab nation are in fact Edomites, right? And this is why we tell people, man, who say that that the Arabs are Edom, that they're wrong, right? But that there are Edomites within the nation of Edom, just as there's Edomites within every other nation, right? So let's read this. This is Jeremiah 49:10. But I have made Esau bare, I have uncovered his secret places, and he shall not be able to hide himself. His seed is spoiled, and his brethren and his neighbors, and he is not. Right? So you see, these Arabs have been, these Edomites have been able to hide themselves amongst the other nations, right? You know, by their fathers marrying Asians, Latinas, Negroes, Arabs, you know, and those kids coming out saying that they're of those nations, right? But we understand that it doesn't matter what your mother is, it matters what your father is, according to Numbers 1:18, right? And also scientifically, because we understand that through scientific understanding that only the male carries the Y chromosome, right? And this is the lineage that the seed line goes through, man, right? So we're able to know that the top elites of the Arabs are these Edomites, right? And this is how the Lord is uncovering them, man, because the Lord has released all this information into the world. This is 2 Thessalonians 2:3. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. And that's what's happening right now, man. You're seeing the atrocities, or you just heard the atrocities that these Jewish people, who are the rulers of the Arabs, are doing to that, you know, country, man. Right? They have done some heinous things to get into power, just as they've done around the world, and what they're planning on doing now, right? So I just wanted to touch upon this, Akim. You know, it was a nice article that I had found a while back, and I always said I was going to get into it, so this is a perfect time to read it to you. So hopefully it was edifying, and you found it enjoyable. So till the next time, I want to give all praises to Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai Ba'Shem Ruach, and double honors to my teachers, the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace and mercy to the elect. Shalom.